consular assistance, and the lack of timely and gender-responsive humanitarian assistance. So in the process as well, there's a lot of human rights violations of refugees. Unfortunately, we have seen closing of doors to asylum seekers and increasingly restrictive measures against migrants. Their ill treatment, including physical assault, detention, and intolerance, racist attacks, xenophobia, and denial of basic health and social protections, and the violation of the principle of non-refoulement. So what are the interventions? And this is my last. Interventions to address violence. I think, first of all, I'd just like to repeat what everyone said, that we need to make sure that our interventions in a time of crisis and emergencies integrate a gender-responsive perspective in migration management and humanitarian assistance. Timely and regular food assistance avoid women and children having to compete stronger male survivors. Contingency planning for large-scale migrant returnees caught in major conflicts. I think what I'm saying is this is going to be the new normal. It's not going to be just, isolated events. Evacuation and international migration assistance must contain non-refoulement guarantees. What we found out is there's no single legal framework that ensures comprehensive protection of migrants in times of crisis, although we have this slew of international law that includes refugee nationality law, optional protocols, and such. There are non-binding multilateral and bilateral agreements that respond to crisis situations as the guiding principles of internal displacement, which applies to persons who have been forced or obliged to flee or to leave their homes or places of habitual residence and home. We have the tools to address gender-based violence. This is UN Security Council 1325, 1820, GR 30. But that is, those are just resolutions. And what we need on the ground is to ensure that women leaders from the communities affected by crisis are involved in peace negotiations. We need the women in the peace table. Women's perspectives and survival strategies must be taken on board and taken into account, taking into account their needs, experiences, and insights, and ensure that evacuation centers and camps are gender-friendly and safe for the well-being of communities, especially women and children. My organization has been conducting self-defense exercises with the women in camps. And these are also part of the education of the men on gender-based violence. So we do not organize individuals, we organize the whole community within the context of the safe space that Dale has mentioned a while ago. So I think those are some of the things that are possible. They're not foolproof solutions, but we need to start somewhere. And to start somewhere must begin with the women themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aurora. I wanted to mention, because, on behalf of two participants who couldn't be here today, from the Hague Conference on Private International Law, which I may have mentioned earlier in relation to surrogacy. That's the organization that, for example, developed and monitors the International Convention on Adoption, that they're working also on a convention, or at least on the preparatory research for a convention on the trans-border enforcement of protection orders, something that may be less significant in actual refugee context where the crisis is so acute, but which regards the possibility of women in normal migration is very significant. Women moving from one context to the next and being able to have their protection orders immediately recognized and enforced by the new states that they're in. So I wanted to mention that. Thank you very, very much to all of our panelists. We have a few moments for questions, and I wanted to ask Yanar Mohammed if she would be the first responder to the theme of the panel. Thank you. So Yanar, as you all know, comes from Iraq. She mentioned that earlier, and we're very, very pleased to have her here.
I'm from the Organization of Women's Freedom in Iraq, and just like Jessica described, I'm running around this area trying to chase the Iraqi government to remind them of their responsibilities towards women and other jeopardized populations. This session was very informative for me, and it's like you said it all. But I will just do some additions because we do all of that work on the ground. What was mentioned about and what ISIS did to women, we on the ground are meeting the women to see whether we can set up empowerment centers for them or shelters, and we, in the same time, reminding the government that these should be treated as prisoners of war who have been tortured and fall under sexual violence. So the things that come to my mind is that how women have suffered under the conflict between the Iraqi army and the ISIS. But it's not only the ISIS that is the reason for the suffering in where we come from. There's also the LGBT. I don't know if anybody has heard about it in this part of the world. In 2011, there was a massacre of LGBT starting in Baghdad and many other cities. And the response of the international community and those who were staying in the green zone was to shift the naming of the massacre from LGBT killings into emo killings in order to avoid the confrontation with the ruling religious institution, because the militias who did the killings were affiliated with the ruling religious institution. So that was another massacre that was not really mentioned much, and we are very lucky that our organization works with Eagle Herc and with Madre, and we're able to get some guidance on it and to put together the first LGBT group who could be able to stand for their own rights and be asking for their own rights. The third thing that I can relate to in the slides that I just saw was trafficking of women, and this has nothing to do even before ISIS. It existed since 2003 and until the current time. Tens of thousands of women have been trafficked into a sex industry inside of Iraq. In the beginning, they were being taken into the United Arab Emirates and into Syria, but now Iraq is a country of source and destination at the same time. And when we as an organization try to bring it to the foreground and write our reports, the government made a campaign against us over the television. So when you are a local group and you are working against these things, you have to really protect yourself. And eventually violence is not against the victims only, but also against the women's organizations who are protecting the victims. Trafficking is a vicious cycle where the victims are unable to step out of the cycle, especially because there are no measures put in place for the women to get identification papers. The first thing the question that comes forward to them is, where is your brother, where is your father? And when she says that she has been in a brothel for many years, they ask her to bring witnesses of why she was in the brothel, what she was doing in the brothel. So the cycle of violence continues on the women, and we are struggling to get the government to find some measures, put some measures in place to get the women out of the trafficking cycle, and it is very difficult. I'll just give these two last pieces of information. We do have shelters in Iraq to protect women from honor killing and from trafficking. And since 2003 until now, the government would not give us the legal status for these shelters. They give us the blind eye, and many individual police get us the victims into our shelters, but the tribal and religious government that was put in place does not acknowledge women's rights to safety. So we do suffer, and that's why we're here in New York to speak about this issue. Again, I thank Eagle Herc, Jessica Stern, and our partners, the Madre, who have been assisting us all throughout all these years. And thank you for all the information. This is very informative, and I will try to take some of it back home to my sisters in order to have some material where we base our work upon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we have a little bit of time for questions. Sonia?
Thank you. This is mostly, I think, a question for Erin. Given the long delay in actually bringing these cases, I mean, we usually think that the legal system, the judiciary system, has a deterrent effect. I mean, given the long delay and the difficulty of actually bringing cases, do you think that it has any effect at all on possible perpetrators?
To be honest, no. I don't know, even if the cases were, even within a few years, I'm not sure how much of a deterrent it ever is. But I think it's important, obviously, for other reasons. Just as, for victims to tell their stories, to tell their truth, for historical record, that the narrative not be shaped by the media or even by investigators, but by the victims and witnesses themselves. But in terms of deterring perpetrators, no, unfortunately, I don't see that happening in any of the conflicts that I've worked in.
Hello, my name is Kelly Reddy. This is a question not just for the panelists, but for any of the audience. I want to ask about prevention. I don't know if there's been much research on it, but we do know that violence against women and men, sexual violence, is very extreme in some cases, like the Congo or Bosnia, and that it's very minor in others, like in Central America. And I'm wondering if anyone has thoughts about what are the conditions that make it more likely that there's going to be gender-based violence in the conflict, and what are the conditions that prevent that or are an obstacle?
Should we collect a few questions and then maybe have the panelists answer?
Thank you to all the panelists. My question is for Jessica, because a big theme of today was, of the conference today was economics and globalization. There are a lot of LGBT organizations, not a lot of, there's specific LGBT organizations that lobby US government to enact economic sanctions against countries that are putting into law these anti-gay laws. And then there are grassroots activists who really go against this, say that these economic sanctions really don't do any good for their communities on the ground. So how do you see these kind of economic sanctions that are coming from U.S. government? How have you heard that they really do affect the communities?
Thank you. Yeah, no, okay.
Thank you all for your illuminating presentations. My question has to do with the mentality that, on behalf of men in populations where there are high numbers of rape, that enables rape. I understand that this is probably one of the most challenging aspects of the issue to tackle, changing the ideology that enables rape, and that may take a very long time. And as you said, Mr. Busher, may be tied to the progress of gender equality in general. However, in the interim, I'm wondering what can be done or what is being done to educate boys and men in areas of high numbers of rape to hopefully accelerate that ideological change and prevent the attitude that says, oh, yes, we may do this, and as Ms. Chavez-Didio says, we can, what was it? We can do what they will with women, with women's bodies.
Okay, so do you want to start answering questions?
Yes. I think any step towards prevention should be tried, and I think in not to think of failure as a possibility. Education in the long run is the best answer. And I think that this should be directed to people, particularly young boys. Frankly speaking, I don't want to train men 35 and above. I'm interested in young men ages 15 and above. And the reason is that, well, they've been exposed to all this media and commodification of women, yes. But they have the capacity or the possibility of changing their minds if they get an alternative message. The problem is in our socialization of girls and boys, they don't have this opportunity to discuss the kind of sexuality that is respectful and that promotes equality between the sexes. All they see the education on sexuality is pornography. So that has got to stop, and there has to be an aggressive campaign for alternative models of masculinities. That's the first one. We've tried it in the Philippines. This is the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. We train young boys as early from 14 up to 22, and we call them Young Men's Camp on sexuality, gender equality.